I had $40 million sitting in my bank account, but I kept it a secret. My own children treated me like a beggar while worshipping their stepfather and his money. They mocked my humble life, called me an embarrassment, and had no idea who they were really dealing with. Then one night at a bankruptcy hearing, I revealed the truth. The shock on their faces was worth every penny. But let me back up. It started with a car. I just bought a 1998 Chevrolet Malibu from a used lot in Butte, Montana. Cost me $800 cash. The passenger door had scratches. The paint was faded, but the engine ran smooth, and that's all that mattered to me. I was proud of that car. It was honest. Reliable. Everything I valued. My daughter Lindsay pulled up in her sleek sedan that evening, took one look at my Chevy, and sneered. "God, what a rust bucket, Dad. That thing belongs in a junkyard." My son Charlie climbed out shaking his head. "You're such a beggar." Our stepdad Richard just got a new BMW. Silver, leather seats, the works. "And you're out here celebrating this piece of junk?" I forced a smile. "Come on in, kids. Dinner's ready. I made your favorite meatloaf and mashed potatoes." Lindsay rolled her eyes. "Meatloaf? Dad, when was the last time you had a decent meal?" "Richard took us to that new steakhouse downtown last week. $100 steaks. Imported wine. I'd set the table with my best plates, the ones their mother left behind after the divorce. The kitchen light made everything look smaller, shabbier. I'd spent 3 hours cooking, hoping we could just have one nice family dinner." "Sit down, please," I said. Charlie slumped into his chair like he was doing me a favor. "Celebrate what exactly? That beater outside?" "Dad, it's embarrassing." They had no idea what I was about to do next. "Your friends don't matter," I said, serving the meatloaf. "What matters is that it's reliable. Transportation." Lindsay actually laughed. A sharp, cutting sound. "Reliable? Dad, it looks like it's held together with prayers and duct tape. Richard's planning to buy me a new Mercedes for my birthday." "A Mercedes? Not some junkyard special." The fork trembled in my hand. Charlie kept going. "It's hard to explain to people why our dad lives like this when our stepdad actually provides for us. He cares about our image. Our future. Look at this place. When was the last time you bought new furniture?" I glanced around my rental kitchen. The cabinets sagged slightly. The chairs didn't match. The refrigerator hummed loud enough to interrupt conversations. But everything was clean. Functional. "I live within my means," I said carefully. "There's value in that." "Value?" Charlie nearly choked. "Dad, you work at the hardware store. You drive a car older than my college degree. What kind of example is that?" The words hit like punches. I'd worked at Home Depot for 30 years. Put them both through college. Never missed a birthday. When their mother Patricia left me for Richard, a contractor with flash and money, they'd picked sides without hesitation. Lindsay waved dismissively. "Richard's been supporting us since Mom married him. He bought Charlie that apartment. Helped with my wedding." "The wedding you didn't invite me to," I muttered. "Because you would have shown up in some thrift store suit," Charlie shot back. "Probably driven that monstrosity. We couldn't have that embarrassment." Something inside me snapped. The careful patience I'd built over years of their dismissiveness, their cruelty, their complete disregard for everything I'd sacrificed. It cracked like ice. I stood up. My chair scraped loud against the floor. "Get out." They stared at me, forks frozen halfway to their mouths. I said, "Get out. Now." Dad, Lindsay started. Don't. My voice carried a finality that surprised even me. Just leave. Take your opinions about my car, my house, my life, and get out. Charlie stood slowly, face flushed. Fine. But don't come crying to us when you need help. I won't, I said. Trust me on that. They grabbed their things in stunned silence. Lindsay paused at the door, her expression mixing shock and wounded pride. You're making a mistake, Dad. We're the only family you have left. I watched their expensive car disappear down the street, its engine purring with German efficiency. Then I locked the door and pulled out my laptop. The screen loaded slowly, then displayed numbers that would have shocked my children into silence. $40,371,891.32. $40 million built stock by. Stock over 40 years of careful planning. It started with my first paycheck from the copper mines when I was 22. Instead of spending it on beer like my co-workers, I bought 5 shares of IBM. Then 10 shares of Coca-Cola. Then more. Always more. Reinvesting dividends, adding whatever I could spare. I remembered those early years vividly. Working double shifts at the mines. Coming home covered in dust, only to spend hours researching companies by lamplight. My first wife thought I was obsessed. But I knew I was building something important. When the mining industry collapsed in the 80s, I'd already diversified. While my neighbors lost everything, I quietly moved to Home Depot and kept investing. Apple at $12 a share. Microsoft at $8. Amazon at $18. Companies that seemed risky then but felt inevitable to me. The secret had been my test. I wanted to see who truly loved me when I appeared to have nothing. Patricia failed that test, leaving me for Richard's flashy success. Now my children failed it too, calling me a beggar while I sat on a fortune that dwarfed their stepfather's entire construction business. I'd planned to leave it all to them. Every share, every dividend, every carefully cultivated dollar. But sitting in my kitchen, remembering the disgust in their voices, something shifted inside me. They didn't deserve inheritance. They deserved education. I opened another browser window and searched property records. It didn't take long. Charlie's apartment building on Granite Street, where he paid $1,500 a month. Lindsay's duplex where she and her husband paid $1,200 monthly. Both owned by Mountain View Holdings, a small company struggling since the pandemic. I smiled for the first time all evening. Tomorrow I would make them an offer they couldn't refuse. They wanted to see a beggar. I'd show them what real poverty looked like. The next morning, I logged into my brokerage account and began selling. 50,000 shares of Microsoft. 30,000 of Apple. I needed $20 million liquid, and I needed it fast. The confirmation came through within 3 business days. Wire transfer complete. $20 million available in your checking account. I stared at that notification for a long moment. 40 years of patience condensed into those simple words. Before I could make my first call to the real estate office, my doorbell rang. 8:30 in the morning. I opened it to find Patricia standing on my porch. Her face flushed with anger. How could you treat your own blood like that? She demanded, pushing past me. Charlie called me last night crying. You threw them out. They're adults, Patricia. 30 and 27 years old. They need to learn respect. Respect? Her voice rose. You humiliated them. They were trying to help you see reason about that ridiculous car. By calling me a beggar. I kept my voice level. By comparing me to your husband like I'm some kind of failure. You are a failure, she exploded. Look at this place, William. You're 62 years old. Living in a rental, driving a car that belongs in a scrapyard. Our children are embarrassed by you. I met her eyes. Actions have consequences. They chose cruelty. I chose not to tolerate it. She stared at me, perhaps surprised by my calm. You've changed. You used to be reasonable. I'm not cold, Patricia. I'm done being a doormat. She gathered her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over, William. I watched her BMW disappear down the hillside, then grabbed my keys. I had appointments to keep. By noon, I sat across from Janet Morrison at Rocky Mountain Realty. Her tired eyes widened when I slid the cashier's check across her desk. $2.8 million, I said. For the apartment building on Granite Street. Cash purchase. How fast can we close? 20 minutes later, the owner of Mountain View Holdings accepted my offer over the phone. By 5 p.m., I owned my son's apartment building. The duplex took even less time. The widow who owned it practically wept with relief when I offered $450,000 cash. Congratulations, Mr. Thornton, the county clerk said, stamping the final deed. You now own both properties. I drove home through Butte's winding streets, 2 property deeds on my passenger seat. My children had no idea their beggar father had just become their landlord. But they were about to find out. I didn't waste time. That same afternoon, I called the property management company. As the new owner, I'm implementing immediate rent adjustments, I told them. Unit 4 at Granite Street. Increases from $1,500 to $4,500 monthly. The duplex Unit B goes from $1,200 to $3,600. Effective in 30 days per Montana law. There was a pause on the line. Mr. Thornton, that's tripling the rent. These tenants will struggle. Then they'll find housing elsewhere, I said. Send the notices today. Janet Morrison called me 2 hours later. Her voice strained. Mr. Thornton, I delivered the notices. The reactions were intense. Go on. The young man in Unit 4, Charlie, he completely lost it. Started screaming about robbery. Slammed the door so hard I thought it might break. He's threatening to move out immediately. I made a non-committal sound. And the young woman in the duplex, she broke down crying. Kept saying how can we afford this now over and over. She begged me to contact the owner. Said she'd do anything to negotiate. These are fair market adjustments, I replied. If they can't afford it, they're welcome to leave. Charlie showed up at the management office the next day with a lawyer friend. I heard about it through Janet's frantic phone call. They're trying to challenge the increase. Claiming it's retaliatory. Retaliatory against what? That's what I asked. They couldn't answer. The lawyer realized the case was weak and left pretty quickly. But Mr. Thornton. They're both convinced someone has it out for them personally. Keep my identity confidential, I instructed. Then came the texts. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. It's really important. I set the phone aside and made myself dinner. Let them sweat. An hour later, a car pulled up outside. Not Lindsay's sleek sedan, but an older Honda. They knocked frantically on my door. I opened it to find them both standing there, faces etched with worry and panic. Lindsay's eyes were red-rimmed, makeup smudged. Charlie's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching. Dad, Lindsay began, voice trembling. We're in real trouble. Our rent just tripled overnight. We don't know what to do. Charlie's face went white when he saw the eviction timeline on the notice in his shaking hand. Please, he added, the words scraping his throat raw. We need a loan. Just until we figure this out. I crossed my arms. You want money from me? Dad, please. Lindsay's tears started flowing. We're desperate. The new landlord won't negotiate. Won't even tell us who he is. We could lose our homes. You called me a beggar, I said. Handle it yourselves. Charlie's facade cracked. I was right then. You are one. Fine. We'll just go to Mom and Richard. They'll help us. They actually care about family. Yes, Lindsay chimed in, wiping her eyes. Richard would never let us suffer. Like this. I looked at them standing on my porch, desperation pouring off them in waves. Then I said 5 words that changed everything. Go ask your stepfather, Richard. They left my porch that night, and within days, the whispers started spreading through Butte like wildfire. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, mentioned it first while tending her garden. Such a shame about your family. Troubles, William. I hope you can work things out. At the coffee shop on Main Street, I overheard Lindsay talking to her friend Sarah. Tissues crumpled in her hands, voice breaking. He just cut us off completely. After everything we've done for him, trying to help him see reason about his finances. The lies were elegant. They painted me as the cruel father who abandoned his struggling children. No mention of their mockery, their years of comparing me to Richard, their endless disrespect. Charlie's approach was more direct. Anonymous notes began appearing in my mailbox. Nothing threatening enough for police, but pointed enough to make their message clear. This won't end well for you. Family is everything. Then came phone calls from unknown numbers. Silence when I answered. Then Charlie's voice, disguised but unmistakable. You made a mistake, old man. I hung up without responding. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Thick, official. Legal letterhead from Patterson and Associates, delivered by registered mail. Notice of intent to sue for emotional distress and abandonment of parental duties. Patricia's signature sprawled across the bottom alongside my children's. They demanded compensation for their suffering and immediate resumption of financial assistance. I reached for my phone and dialed Frank Morrison, the lawyer who'd handled my property purchases discreetly. William, what can I do for you? I need advice on a frivolous lawsuit. Frank's chuckle was dry. Let me guess. They want money. They want me to resume financial support I never legally owed them in the first place. Bring me the papers. This sounds like pure harassment. But William, I've been doing some research on your son. Charlie. There are some interesting vulnerabilities in his employment history. What kind of vulnerabilities? The kind that make lawsuits disappear quickly. I'll send details, but you might want to consult with a private investigator. I know someone discreet. He gave me a name and number. Detective Ray Sullivan, retired from Butte Police Department, now working private cases. I held the card, feeling its sharp edges, considering the implications. My children had chosen to escalate this into the courts and the community. Perhaps it was time to respond in kind. 2 weeks later, Detective Sullivan handed me an envelope. What was inside would destroy my son's career. I spread Detective Sullivan's report across my kitchen table, reviewing each document with meticulous care. Charlie's employment file painted a picture of escalating dishonesty. Fabricated mileage reports claiming trips he never took. Inflated client dinner receipts from restaurants he'd eaten at alone. Overtime hours he'd never worked, submitted month after month to Mountain States Insurance. One receipt caught my eye. A supposed client dinner at a steakhouse that had been closed for renovations. The entire week he claimed to have eaten there. $300 he'd pocketed. It reminded me of something. 16-year-old Charlie claiming he'd spent his allowance on school supplies when I later found video game receipts in his backpack. The pattern had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I pulled out an old photo from my desk drawer. Charlie at 7 years old. Helping me wash my car for pocket money. Grinning, soap suds in his hair. That little boy felt like a stranger now. My hand hovered over the keyboard. 30 seconds of hesitation. Maybe less. Then I remembered his voice on the phone. "This won't end well for you, old man." I typed the email carefully, attaching scanned copies of every piece of evidence. "Your employee, Charlie Thornton, has been systematically defrauding your company. Documentation attached. A concerned citizen." The message sent with a soft electronic chime. Charlie's downfall was just the opening act. I sealed additional copies in an envelope addressed to Mountain States Insurance corporate headquarters in Denver, adding a detailed cover letter. My hands were gloved. Old habits from years of careful investing where anonymity sometimes mattered. Within a week, the news filtered through Butte's tight-knit gossip network. Charlie had been terminated effective immediately. Official reason was violation of company policies, but the rumors were more colorful. They found out he was stealing, Mrs. Henderson whispered over her fence. Caught him red-handed with fake receipts. I listened with the same neutral expression I'd worn for 40 years of family gatherings. When she asked what I thought, I simply said, "Actions have consequences." That afternoon, I caught a social media post from one of Lindsay's friends. "Prayers for the Thornton family during this difficult time. Sometimes life just hits you from all sides." I noted Lindsay's rising desperation through that snippet. She'd always been the more emotional of my children, quicker to crack under pressure. Charlie's job loss would terrify her, making her wonder if she was next. The question was, what secrets was she hiding? I closed my laptop and pulled out Detective Sullivan's second report, the one I'd commissioned specifically on Lindsay's real estate practices. What I found made Charlie's fraud look like pocket change. My daughter thought she was safe. She had no idea I'd already uncovered her secrets too. Detective Sullivan's report on Lindsay was damning. Property valuations inflated by 20%. Foundation cracks concealed with strategic furniture placement. Water damage hidden behind fresh paint and creative staging. But what made my blood run cold was the elderly couple. The Johnsons, both in their 70s, had bought a house Lindsay assured them had a recently renovated roof. 3 months after closing, it collapsed during a spring storm. The repair costs wiped out their retirement savings. Lindsay had forged the inspection report. I stared at the photos of the Johnsons standing in their ruined living room, rain pouring through the gaping hole above them. They looked like someone's grandparents. They looked terrified. My daughter had done this. I didn't hesitate this time. I uploaded the files to 3 anonymous review sites, each post carefully crafted to appear organic. Butte's real estate community was small. Word would travel fast. Within hours, the story went viral. Local news sites picked it up. Concerned homeowner exposes fraud in local real estate market. I drove across town and parked outside Lindsay's office, watching through the window. She paced frantically, phone pressed to her ear. "No, Mrs. Patterson, I can explain." "Yes, I understand you're upset, but..." The call ended abruptly. Her shoulders shook. Another client stormed into the office, his voice carrying through the glass. "You swore that foundation was solid. It's cracking down the middle. You've ruined my investment." Lindsay's social media defense only made things worse. "These are baseless accusations from anonymous sources," she wrote. "I've always acted with integrity." The comments section exploded. Verified clients sharing their own horror stories. Each one worse than the last. Within a week, her office stood empty. A for rent sign in the window told the story better than any news article could. I walked past it one evening. Hands in my pockets. My reflection stared back from the dark glass. Then the bankruptcy notice arrived in my mailbox. My son was officially broke. And that courthouse hearing would become the stage for my final revelation. The Butte County Courthouse smelled of old wood and decades of legal drama. I arrived early, slipping into the back row with my folder of documents tucked under my arm. Charlie sat at the petitioner's table, his lawyer shuffling papers with the resigned air of someone managing an inevitable loss. His fingers drummed nervously against the wood. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Lindsay sat behind him for support, glancing around anxiously, as if expecting more bad news to materialize from the shadows. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s named Margaret Holbrook, reviewed the bankruptcy petition with practiced efficiency. Mr. Thornton, you're claiming debts exceeding $150,000 with assets of less than $30,000. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Charlie replied, his voice barely above a whisper. And your primary creditor is listed as unknown property owner for back rent? This was my moment. I stood from my seat, documents in hand, feeling the weight of decades lift with each step toward the front of the courtroom. Your Honor, I can clarify that matter. The room fell silent. Heads turned. Charlie's head snapped around, his eyes widening as recognition dawned. I'm the landlord in question, I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden hush. And I'd like to submit evidence regarding this bankruptcy claim. The judge raised her eyebrows. And you are? William Thornton. His father. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Charlie's mouth opened and closed like a fish struggling for air. This can't be, he stammered, half rising from his chair. I handed the court clerk my property deeds, bank statements, and eviction notices. The clerk passed them to Judge Holbrook, who examined them with increasing interest. Your Honor, I own both properties where my children currently reside. The apartment building at 847 Granite Street, and the duplex at 12 Oak Avenue. Given their continued harassment, threats, and this frivolous legal action, I'm initiating immediate eviction proceedings. The judge studied my bank statements, her expression shifting. Mr. Thornton, Senior Mr. Thornton, these financial records show assets exceeding $40 million. $40,371,891.32, to be exact, Your Honor. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Charlie sat frozen, staring at the bank statements like they were written in a foreign language. 40 million. He whispered. You had $40 million. I met his eyes. Yes. And you called me a beggar. Lindsay was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. We're your children. How could you do this to us? I gave you every opportunity to show respect, I said calmly. To demonstrate the character that would have made you worthy heirs. Instead, you chose cruelty. You chose to worship your stepfather's money while mocking my modest life. You chose to sue me for emotional distress, while causing me years of pain. Judge Holbrook's gavel fell with sharp finality. Petition denied. Based on the evidence presented, the debt is legitimate and the eviction is granted. Mr. Charlie Thornton, you have 72 hours to vacate the premises. The bailiff approached Charlie with the official notice. Charlie's lawyer closed his briefcase, clearly done with this disaster. I turned to walk out, my back straight, my mind already turning to the quiet satisfaction of justice finally served. But I heard footsteps behind me. Rapid, desperate. My children were following me out of the courthouse. And what they did next on those courthouse steps shocked everyone watching. Dad, wait. Lindsay's voice cut through the afternoon air, her heels clicking frantically against the courthouse steps. I paused, hand on my car door, watching them rush toward me with the desperation of drowning swimmers. They dropped to their knees right there on the stone steps. Pedestrians stopped and stared. A few pulled out phones. "Dad, we're so sorry," Charlie gasped. "We didn't know. We never realized you had $40 million. I stood perfectly still. "So that's what this is about? The money?" "No," Lindsay sobbed, mascara streaming down her face. "We were wrong about everything. The car, the house, the way we talked to you. We're begging you. Don't do this to us." She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a small wooden heart, weathered and faded. "Remember when you made this for me in elementary school? You said it would always keep us connected. We're still your children, Dad. We're still family." I stared at that wooden heart. I remembered carving it at my kitchen table, Lindsay watching me with wide eyes full of love and trust. I remembered teaching Charlie to ride a bike, running beside him until my lungs burned. I remembered protecting Lindsay from bullies in middle school, holding her while she cried. My hand trembled. For just a moment, I almost broke. Then I remembered their voices at that dinner table. Beggar. Embarrassment. Rust bucket. "It's too late for that," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "You've shown your true colors. The money doesn't change what you are." "But we'll pay rent," Charlie pleaded. "We'll get jobs. We'll make it right." "No more," I said. I turned away from them. Their pleas fading like distant thunder as I walked to my car. Their voices called after me, but I didn't look back. Over the next 72 hours, I watched from a distance as their lives completely unraveled. The eviction officers arrived precisely on schedule. Through intermediaries, I heard about the frantic packing, the neighbors gathering to watch, the moving trucks filled with furniture they'd have to sell just to afford temporary housing. Their luxury cars were the first to go. Repossessed when they couldn't make the payments. Designer clothes, expensive electronics. All the status symbols they'd once flaunted were sacrificed to pawn shops and online sales. Charlie ended up in a weekly rate motel on the outskirts of Butte. Lindsay couch surfed between friends. Each stay growing shorter as her welcome wore thin. Patricia called one evening, her voice tight with rage. "You've destroyed them, William. Are you satisfied now?" "I didn't destroy them," I replied calmly. "I simply stopped enabling their destruction of themselves. They're your children. They stopped being my children the moment they chose contempt over love. The moment they decided Richard was more valuable than the man who actually raised them." She hung up without another word. But I was done with Butte. Done with the memories and the pain and the ghosts of what my family used to be. I liquidated 30% of my portfolio. Sold both rental properties to new management companies. Listed my own house, which sold within a week to a young family who saw its potential rather than its modest appearance. Then I boarded a plane to California. Butte shrank below me as we climbed into the sky, the Rocky Mountains fading into the distance. Carmel by the sea welcomed me with salt air and endless horizons. The house I bought sat on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, its windows framing sunsets that painted the sky in colors I'd forgotten existed. At a community center lecture series, I met Eleanor Walsh. 60 years old, widow, former teacher. We struck up a conversation about books, then walks along the beach, then dinners overlooking the water. I raised 3 children, she told me one evening as waves crashed below my deck. They visit twice a year. I've learned that family isn't always about blood. What is it about then? I asked. Respect. Kindness. The choice to see value in someone beyond what they can provide. We walked the beach most evenings after that, our conversations flowing as easily as the tide. She understood the satisfaction of nurturing something worthwhile. My phone buzzed one sunset. Unknown number. Probably one of my children trying a new approach. I glanced at it, then deleted it. Without reading. My attention returned to the horizon where tomorrow's possibilities waited. The waves crashed in their eternal rhythm, and I realized I'd finally found what I'd been investing in. All these years. Not just financial security, but the self-respect to walk away from toxicity, and the wisdom to recognize genuine connection when it appeared. As the sun dipped below the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I understood one final truth about revenge, forgiveness, and the real meaning of wealth. Here's what 40 years of patience taught me. Wealth isn't just about the numbers in your bank account. It's about the respect you command and the boundaries you're willing to enforce. My children saw my modest lifestyle as weakness. They mistook humility for poverty and kindness for desperation. But real strength isn't loud. It doesn't need a BMW or a mansion to prove its worth. I spent 4 decades building financial security. In silence, testing who would love me when I appeared to have nothing. My ex-wife failed that test. My children failed it too. And that failure revealed a truth more valuable than $40 million. Family isn't just blood. It's respect, loyalty, and the willingness to see someone's value beyond their material possessions. When those elements disappear, you're not obligated to suffer. In silence. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's self-preservation. Did I get revenge? Maybe. But more than that, I got my self-respect back. And standing on that California bluff watching the sunset with someone who valued me for who I truly was, I realized that was the best investment I ever made. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another story of justice served. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and whether you think I did the right thing. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about respect and boundaries, share this video with them. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you for listening to John's Revenge Stories, where we prove that patience, dignity, and self-respect always win in the end.